You got your PhD from Harvard. How do you feel given the most recent fallout?
These opener questions are incredible. Um, it's it's amazing. It's amazing that it came to this. And as a person I know studying at Harvard said, I wonder if we are the last generation who will continue to see Harvard as this shining city on a hill. And that's somebody who's there now. I think it's a disgrace, and we can't talk about it, which is the fascinating part, that we are effectively losing our society because we're afraid to say certain things, because we're being made afraid to say certain things.
What do you mean?
Well, okay, so as a Harvard alum, you get the Harvard magazine, and this thing is incredible because it's just always Harvard people promoting other Harvard people in this sort of PR.
The Nepotism magazine.
Yeah. PR Fest. And I think I remember that the article introducing Claudine Gay was entitled A Scholar's Scholar. And I knew from the get-go that this was not going to go well. Because, I don't think people understand what Harvard is and how it functions and why it's different. Harvard is really the fusion of two separate institutions. One is about brilliance and one is about power. And so you can think about this as the sharpest minds and the sharpest elbows. And the sharp mind crowd gets tons of resources because the sharp elbow crowd makes sure that power is used to perpetuate Harvard's place of privilege. And the sharp mind crowd contributes prestige to the sharp elbow crowd. And so by virtue of the fact that you can't deconflate the sharp minds and the sharp elbows, Harvard continues to have this very special place. Now, what is this special place? Why isn't it just a university like any other? I think sort of two or three principal reasons. One of which is that Harvard is sort of an extension of the U.S. government. The government department, which is sort of Harvard's version of poli-sci, is kind of an extension of the State Department at times. The economics department ends up setting economic policy in many ways for the United States. And above all, there is this concept that in every field, there's usually one institution that sets the narrative. So, for example, in journalism, the New York Times is different than all other newspapers and news organs because of its focus on what we sometimes hear of as narrative-driven journalism. Now, people now talk a lot more about narrative, but 15 years ago, I don't think this was common knowledge, that the editorial room at the New York Times is a place where people thought about what the long arcs of stories were. And you figured out what the arc of the story was before the facts came in. So, for example, Hillary is inevitable was a long arc in narrative-driven journalism. It wasn't true, but all the information that came in when Hillary was running against Donald Trump was fed through this prism of the inevitability of Hillary Clinton. In the same way, Harvard practices narrative-driven academics. It tells you what is happening, what the grand arcs are, and those, just like the 2016 election, are very often untrue. And so that's a way in which Harvard serves power. It brings people in who are brilliant, and then it takes the ones of those who are willing to play ball with the engines of power, and it enters into the storytelling mode in which Harvard sets the tone for everyone. So when you lose Harvard, it's very important and very different. But the last thing that I would say that really distinguishes Harvard is that Harvard there's the open part of Harvard, the classrooms, and there's the closed part of Harvard that you can't see at all. And it's sort of a system of star chambers. And I don't think people who have not tangled with Harvard would comprehend how much of what Harvard gets done, it gets done behind closed doors because it can't be done in the open.
What do you mean?
I'll give you a crazy example. I was not allowed to attend my own thesis defense. Now, you're not an academic by training. If you tell that to an academic, they don't even understand what you're saying. They think that you're making a joke, or you must not have understood something, or maybe you were sick that day and you had to zoom in, or who knows what. But I don't mean that at all. I mean, when I tried to get my PhD, the Harvard math department instituted a rule that said you could not attend your own thesis defense. You could not determine who would present your thesis, your dissertation. So basically what happened is if you had an advisor, which almost everyone did, your advisor presented your thesis behind closed doors. Nobody's ever heard of this in the history of academics.
Is this how Claudine Gay got away with it?
No, I don't know. Claudine Gay was taken down for two different reasons. One reason she was taken down was for not having crisper statements about the uniformity of application of rules of codes of conduct when it came to Jewish students. So it's one thing whether you have a free speech policy, or maybe you have a code of conduct where you say we can't tolerate certain kinds of speech. Whatever that is, there's certainly a question about the differential application of that on behalf of different groups. So that was one of the ways that she got into trouble. The other way she got into trouble was the vulnerability of plagiarism and a weak academic record. And, you know, let me just say this early and everyone will come to it late. Plagiarism is the tip of the iceberg of attribution bullying, where effectively you have these people who determine who did what in the narrative-driven storytelling that is academic, and what papers get cited, which papers don't, what discoveries are named for certain people is determined largely by a tiny number of institutions, Harvard preeminent among them. And so Harvard just plays games morning, noon, and night with writing stories that put Harvard at the center and particular individuals at the top, whether or not those individuals have earned it or not. And what's hard for me is most people are now thinking, okay, Harvard is just full of it, but it isn't. It's half full of it and half the best place on earth to do anything important. And that tension is what's not recognized. Now, power has to take a back seat to academics and to discovery and to brilliance if this game is to be maintained. You can't constantly just exercise power and tell stories. So in my history with this university, I've tried to figure out why does it behave so differently than every other institution of research.
Is DEI the boogeyman that everyone is worried about?
You know, this is so hard to even get into it. Our universities won World War II in large measure. I mean, if you need codes broken, if you need new weapons developed, you're supposed to have SEAL Team 6 of the human mind that you can call on. And that's supposed to be MIT, Caltech, Princeton, Harvard. It's a very small number of super prestigious universities. Part of the problem is if you think about, I don't even know how to say this exactly. If you think about a university as akin to an exotic car, a lot of people buy a McLaren or a Lamborghini or Ferrari because they like the styling, status. But the soul of all of those cars is racing. right? And the people who buy the cars for the racing sometimes are really annoyed by the fact that the cars are status symbols. And that's what a research university is to me. I'm interested in the racing, and other people are interested because it's sort of what you do to show that you got a $2 million bonus from your investment banking job. If you don't race it, I don't know what you're doing there, and I'd prefer that you'd leave. The purpose of a university is not teaching. The purpose of a great university is training and research. And we can't afford to lose that. I don't think people have any idea how important it is to be able to call on your own nation's top academics when you need the truth, you need something done, you need help. And so whatever it is that is denaturing our universities, that's turning this into a nightclub where the whole trick is to get past the bouncer for the cool kids, has to be stopped.